Blood West is a 2023 first-person shooter with immersive sim elements developed by Hyperstrange. I'm gonna kick off this video by saying that I am literally obsessed with this game. I love its slow, methodical gunplay, its expansive, interconnected spaces, its creepy atmosphere, its moody, understated plot, its art direction, everything. Blood West was straight up one of the best games I played in 2023, if not the best game I've played in 2023. And I played Baldur's Gate 3, so I'm sure this comes as a shock. I went in expecting an enjoyable retro shooter, and not 3 hours into my first playthrough, I was already unable to stop talking about it. Just ask all my friends if you don't believe me. Actually, please don't do that. So let's jump straight into Blood West and see what it's about. A special thank you to my buddy Hey Blondie for lending his voice to this video. There's a link to his channel in the description, please check him out, his videos are awesome. Also, I have a Twitter where I tweet and a Patreon where you can support my work with real life money. Cool. Blood West takes place in a cursed take on the Wild West called the Barren Lands. As you might expect from a game called Blood West, the Barren Lands are anything but barren. That is, if you consider acid-spitting centipede men, gunslinging birdmen, coffin-wearing undead, zombie miners, spell-casting human-bear hybrids, cowboy wraiths, and whatever the fuck these things are, signs of life. The Barren Lands are lively, just not in the way you thought. You play as a recently undeadified gunslinger who was resurrected by shadowy otherworldly forces to find the source of the curse and destroy it. In typical undead fashion, you have no recollection of your life pre-resurrection. Were you the basically a good guy but with just enough of an edge to make you appear interesting kind of gunslinger? Or the bank-robbing, horse-stealing, gold-yearning with an ironic nickname like Kid Blunt that contrasts their cruelty who you totally see doing wet work for Al Swearingen and dying a horrible death in Season 1 Episode 7 of Deadwood type of gunslinger? Who knows? Probably the latter. In any case, it doesn't really matter because you're fucked either way. Not only did the villain-coded Johnny Matragrano-voiced totem snatch you from the sweet embrace of death to destroy whatever's infecting the Barren Lands all by yourself, there's also the issue of figuring out a way to rid yourself of the curse and free your soul. Other than that, the game is pretty stingy with details and mostly leaves it up to the player to piece the story together. Blood West is first and foremost a mood piece. While the gorgeously animated cutscenes and NPC conversations give you the cliff notes, it's up to you to put the pieces together and sort of figure out what the fuck happened and why everything is out to kill you. Notes, item descriptions, and environmental cues do the heavy lifting in terms of world building. For example, there's a series of journal pages detailing a young farmer's gradual descent into madness. I'm not gonna tell you why he became insane because I really want you to play this game, but I will give you a hint. It has to do with the most unassuming farm animal. So yeah, in this sense, and more superficially in others, it's kinda like that other game that birthed an entire content niche on YouTube. And in a slow, atmospheric game with only the moans and ramblings of the infected to keep you company, this approach to world building works like a charm. Blood West might not seem like a looker at first glance, but it does have some interesting things going for it in terms of art direction. So the first thing you'll notice is the low-res PS1 aesthetic. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the visuals take some getting used to. Even though I'm more of an art direction over graphics kinda guy, I'd be lying if I said that the transition from the stylishly animated intro cutscene to the game itself didn't feel jarring. However, it wasn't long until I realized that the low-res aesthetic was the perfect choice for the kind of world Blood West is set in. How do I put this more concisely? Graphics low-res, art direction strong. Or rather, art direction strong because graphics low-res. The environments and monsters are detailed enough to fully convey just how fucked up things are, but they stop just short of giving you the full picture. It's up to you to fill in the blanks. The acid-spitting centipede man is aggressively creepy and disgusting in his low-res form, but even so, it's just a suggestion, an idea of what it could be were it rendered in hyper-realistic graphics, which makes it even more disturbing. The saloon where the patrons made their last stand against the abomination looks conclusively wrecked, but take a closer look and you'll notice that the gore and destruction are definitive but suggestive at the same time. It's an effect similar to when you witness something disturbing before the brain has had time to process it. Like my first time fighting a Vendingo, I knew what I was up against on an intellectual level, but only when I took a closer look at its body did I fully comprehend what I had just killed. I don't know, I hope this makes sense. So yeah, Blood West is a treat from a visual standpoint, and the way it manages to convey the grit and cursed state of this world using a mix of gore and suggestion. If you're understandably put off by the visuals, I recommend pushing through. They make more sense with time. But don't take my word for it, here's my buddy Blondie's take on the game's presentation.
It's almost impossible to do Blood West justice in summary, but you're in great hands with Summer of Mark, so I'll do my best. I fell in love with Blood West in the opening hour, a phenomenon I rarely experience with games. The brutal primacy of a western frontier setting, filled with scallywags, death, and character, is a fitting backdrop for the supernatural. Blood West's disturbing enemies are playfully perverted versions of common western tropes, which many will recognize. Blood West blends genres well and demonstrates an intimate understanding of why this formula is potent. The styled pixel aesthetic leads players to the horror but boldly encourages them to feel the gruesome details. A crafted soundscape augments environments with feeling. A lonely wind nudging tumbleweeds across the dust-bitten earth. A warning gasp of danger from a nearby cave. The panic at hurried footsteps closing on your location. And the trepidation of approaching a sound you've not heard before. Sound immerses and informs, core components of great sound design.
One thing I did not expect to be so impressed by was the sound design. If you liked Thief's intricate, creepy soundscapes, you'll feel right at home in Blood West. Let me ask you a question. How does a decrepit Civil War fort infested by abominations sound in your mind? Maybe some gurgling and snarls and shit? How about the echoes of a past battle to spice things up? How about a cave infested with skin-collecting cultists?
It's never enough.
A saloon?
I will never expire.
Blood West wears its thief influences on its sleeve and I fucking love it for that. The soundscape is so oppressive that even by the end of the game, when you should be fully geared and skilled up, you still feel on edge and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Even the little sound cues that play when you pick up loot are straight up thief core.
That's a nice little thing. My new favorite thing.
You might have recognized that voice. The undead gunslinger is voiced by none other than Stephen Russell. However, unlike Garrett, the undead gunslinger is less snarky, roguish type quipping about the excesses of the rich, and more, my only purpose in unlife is to rid these lands of the disgusting filth infecting it. Let's have a listen.
And stay down. And don't come back. Here's some friendly advice. Don't get back up. On with the wind.
The rest of the voice cast is also excellent. Sadly, since I can't showcase their performances without spoiling the story, you'll just have to take my word for it. sorry. What I can showcase without giving away the story is Gianni Montalgrano's performance as the shady, cow-masked totem. He sounds so aggressively untrustworthy, but not in a mustache-twirling villain kind of way. More like in a dude who asks if he could bum a cigarette from you only to brazenly snatch 3 cigarettes from your pack and walk away kind of way. Let's have a listen.
By means of our immense powers from whenever place you've been before, we know of your exploits and achievements. Your fame reaches wide across the country. The nasty rumors about you reach even further. You're our ace in a sleeve. Before you ask, no, we cannot send you back. Not yet. See, that's the nature of every summoning. It must have a reason.
So yeah, presentation-wise, Blood West is a treat. It looks spooky, it sounds spooky, and the western theme only adds to its charm. Let's talk gameplay.
Long story short, we're fucked.
If I had to pitch Blood West to a friend in one sentence, which I did multiple times, I'd say something along the lines of tactical semi-open world shooter with some stalker mechanics and immersive sim elements. That's quite a mouthful, so let's take it one step at a time. So at first glance, Blood West is a sneaky shooter. That's because enemies do a truckload of damage, with some later game enemies being able to straight up one-shot kill you, and you are a squishy little boy who, despite being undead, can bleed profusely. Yes, there's bleed damage, 2 types of bleed damage as a matter of fact, and man, let me tell you, this game doesn't fuck around. If you don't plug that leak with a bandage, you can bleed out faster than I don't have a clever analogy here. You'll die. Also, the only healing item that stacks in your quick access bar is the bandage, whose healing properties are marginal at best. Every time you drink a healing potion, you have to physically drag a new potion from the inventory to the quick access bar. Healing happens gradually in real time, and by the way, items take up physical space in the inventory and the game doesn't pause when you access it. So forget about taking a quick break to drink a potion while inspecting your ever-expanding arsenal of weapons. That just ain't gonna happen, bucko. So yeah, these are some pretty hardcore shooter, retro, RPG-ish thingies mechanics. What's that? You want more inventory management talk? Well, you're just in luck.
Inventory and item management inform much of Blood West's gameplay, particularly in chapters 1 and 2. There's a survival element, a pervasive feeling of inadequate resources and shrinking inventory space which define the survival genre. You'll scrounge every bullet and cherish every tonic, never knowing when the next vital resource might appear. This feeling never disappears completely, you just get better at managing equipment. I was able to stockpile huge amounts of standard shotgun and revolver ammo into the second chapter using melee kills throughout most of chapter 1. Diligence is rewarded in Blood West. You don't have to play conservative, but you'll need a solid build if you don't.
Well said, my friend. Thankfully, you have tons of options to keep yourself alive in this hellscape. For one, at least in the early game when ammo is sparse, stealth is your best friend. Lining up sneaky headshots, whether with firearms or bows, is absolutely vital to your survival. It can mean the difference between taking down a monster with one clean headshot, or wasting an entire regiment's worth of ammo on a single enemy only to be mauled to death anyways. And you really don't want to be wasteful with ammo, because the game is quite stingy with ammo in the first chapter. Sure, you can always buy more ammo, but merchants have limited inventories that fully reset only after resting. However, resting respawns enemies, so you might want to be mindful of when you do it. Trust me, there's nothing worse than hitting the sack only to wake up to not having enough capital to fund your next expedition. But hey, who needs ammo when you have a bunch of melee weapons to choose from? Melee combat is similar to gun combat in that it prioritizes headshots. You got a nifty stamina system that prevents you from spam attacking monsters, and a light and strong attack. When upgraded, light attacks can stun lock enemies, though I wouldn't know anything about that because early in the game I stupidly labeled light attacks as useless and switched my attention to strong attacks, which admittedly are more visually interesting and visceral. Like, holy shit does it feel good to crack heads in this game. The thing about melee combat is that you obviously need to get close to monsters, and these are not the kind of monsters you want to get close to. Don't expect any undead class solidarity. These motherfuckers will smoke you like man, I'm really struggling with analogies today. They'll kill you. Fast. Speaking of which, in Blood West, dying has consequences. Not huge consequences, but severe enough to make you think twice before barging into a cave filled with leech-throwing cultists. Upon death, you're taken back to the last checkpoint and enemies respawn. Not only that, but you get a debuff, HP, stamina, XP gain, which gets gradually worse the more you die. To remove the buff, you can either do a quick errand for the totem dude or just drink a specific potion. If you want to decrease the risk of dying as much as possible, there's always the stealth option. Blood West features a rudimentary but satisfying stealth system in the vein of Thief. You have a detection meter that indicates how visible you are to enemies, and various spaces to hide in when they're pursuing you. Also similar to Thief, enemies are cartoonishly loud, as to make it easy for the player to gauge their location based on sound. Because sneak attacks do extra damage, shooting can attract more enemies, and the design incentivizes the player to get the drop on enemies anyways, stealth is, for the most part, a viable option. I'd love to say it's a one-to-one alternative to traditional combat, but it's not. Occasionally, you'll have to whip out your trusty rifle to put the odd Vendingo down. Then there's the bosses. I honestly can't see how stealth could work on them. Okay, to be entirely fair, the first boss has a stealth option, but not a stealth solution. What I mean by that is that there are two ways to defeat it. The first involves straight up showing up in the boss arena and shooting it until it drops dead. The second option involves sneaking through a network of tunnels and whittling down its health to half by shooting its pustules. Sounds easy, but here's the catch. Those tunnels are absolutely stacked with monsters. In true Mark fashion, I attracted the attention of the entire fucking cave and they started swarming me. Out of sheer dumb luck, I was able to kite them to a more favorable location where I proceeded to pick them off one by one from the high ground. This was a great gimmick, I loved the concept, but after going through all that, you still have to drop down in the arena and finish it off the traditional way, which kinda... It didn't spoil the whole thing, but I don't know. I understand why it would have been hard to implement. I'm rambling. Anyways, if you're still struggling and can't quite get the hang of the game's combat and stealth mechanics, the totem is more than happy to provide you with a blessing in exchange for a shiny coin. I'll just put them on the screen. While the blessings were a huge help in the early game, once Act 2 started, I found myself engaging less and less with this mechanic as upgrading skills, equipping the right artifacts, map knowledge and learning how to counter monsters rendered it effectively obsolete. Skills govern things such as HP, stamina regeneration, inventory space, weapon sway, bandage effectiveness, melee damage, XP gain, weapon reload speed, resistance to various types of damage like poison and bleeding, and so on. Each skill has 3 tiers, with each tier costing a certain number of skill points, which are awarded when you kill enough monsters to level up. Now, while my build was far from optimized or even ideal or good, I was thankfully wise enough to increase my inventory space and XP gain very early in the game, and I recommend you do the same. A skill that I wish I'd picked up earlier is Quick Fingers. See, in Blood West, arrows and bolts have a chance to break when retrieved from bodies. Quick Fingers reduces their risk to the point where as long as you're careful not to shoot them in the ether, you effectively have an endless supply of arrows and bolts. If you're a bow or crossbow user, this skill is a must. Blood West has an interesting trinket/artifact system very similar to Stalkers. You get free slots to fill up with trinkets for various bonuses to your skills. Some trinkets are stackable, some are not, but the best ones, which I was too much of a coward to equip, are soulbound, meaning you can't remove them without dying. Now, I can't say I experimented with the trinket system a whole lot because, to tell you the truth, I rolled with the same 3 or 4 cursed courier rotation for 80% of the game's duration. The trinket that pauses the game when you access the inventory, fucking lifesaver. I couldn't imagine living without it. I also got a ridiculous HP regen boost by stacking 3 soul bear hearts because I'm just boring like that. Now, the thing is, you'll want to experiment with as many playstyles and weapons and trinkets as possible for 2 main reasons. First of all, like I mentioned earlier, the game is brutally difficult. Secondly, you'll discover sooner rather than later that the weapons and strategies that worked so well in one area won't necessarily work in the next. For example, I discovered quickly and rather violently that the Vine Axe and the Decapitator shotgun that had carried me through the first chapter were absolutely useless against the tougher and more aggressive enemies from the second chapter. So I switched to a crossbow and tried as best as I could to keep it on the down low. On that same note, there is a specific enemy in chapter 3 whose gimmick would have felt like a betrayal, the good kind of betrayal of everything the game had taught you so far if it weren't funny as shit, but I won't spoil the surprise. So yeah, Blood West can feel like a difficult game to get into. It's pretty old school, it doesn't hold your hand, and its reliance on stealth, especially in the early game, will definitely put some people off. But when it clicks, oh boy does it click. Now that we've covered the general mechanics, let's take some time to analyze Blood West's immersive simness. So first, let's tackle the telltale immersive sim signs. Can you stack crates or use the environment to access areas earlier than you're supposed to? No. Can you turn the environment against enemies by, for example, pouring a canister of oil on the ground and setting it on fire? No. Do you have multiple options to solve specific problems? Take this safe. Can you lockpick it? Can you blow it up with a stick of dynamite? No, you need a key to open it. Are there any audio logs fleshing out the finer details of the setting? Well, no, it's a game set in the Wild West, don't be silly. Is there any emergent gameplay to speak of? Not really, at least not in the traditional sense. And you know what? That's fine, because Blood West still qualifies as a light immersive sim in my book. While Blood West doesn't check off the standard requirements of immersive sims, it does, let's say, scratch a few important itches. For one, Blood West does a great job of immersing players into its world. The combat's flow, for example, is very methodical and deliberate. This is a hostile world infested with all kinds of abominations that can smoke you in one hit, so careful preparation and planning are key to surviving encounters. Do I have the right ammo type for this enemy? Do I have enough healing potions in my inventory? Do I have an exit strategy in case things take a turn for the worse? Is there some trinket combination I hadn't considered before that could make my life easier? Is it really wise to venture into this cave with only 2 bullets in my revolver and nothing else? This planning and preparation component is pretty much the core of Blood West's gameplay loop and where the game's im-simish pedigree shines. Additionally, monsters have their own strengths and weaknesses and react in unique ways towards certain types of damage. Prodigal Daughters, these twisted, deformed ex-saloon entertainers, will go into a frenzy if you shoot their masks off and reveal their monstrous faces. Soul Bears, which are effectively human bear hybrids, will act differently depending on which of their heads you kill first. Killing the human head first makes them act more animalistically and vice versa. The coffin zombie, I know they're called half-risen undead, I just like calling them coffin zombies. You can destroy its coffin with flammable ammo or by simply smashing it with an axe, in which case it will go into a frenzy and lunge at you. Or if you want to keep things simple, just shoot its legs. Birdmen, owing to their gunslinging backgrounds, are extremely agile and can easily dodge your shots while unleashing a storm of bullets in your direction. You can turn this against them by dodging yourself and taking the shot only when they're reloading their pistols. What makes Vendingos dangerous is not their size, but the skull on their chest that spawns spirits. You can shoot the skull to remove its ability to spawn spirits, but this will cause it to move faster. On top of that, monsters are weak to specific ammo types. Hags have a weakness to gold ammo, Wraiths are immune to all types of ammunition except silver. In fact, pretty much all enemies will go down faster if you use gold ammo, but you have to be pretty conservative with it because it's very rare. So yeah, the game does give you some leeway in how you approach combat. It's a constant balancing game where you weigh the pros and cons of your strategy and act accordingly. Like, I'm sure you wouldn't want to enrage a Vendingo in a close space. I mean, that's just a classic fuck around and find out type of scenario. There are also tons of tiny immersion enhancing mechanics. Loading each bullet into your gun, physically unloading the guns dropped by fallen enemies, Molotov cocktails and dynamites are individual non-stackable items, maps take physical space in your inventory, backpacks too. What, you thought buying a backpack would just magically increase the number of inventory slots? Nah bro, this ain't that kind of game. The last thing I want to talk about is exploration and level design. Blood West is split into 3 chapters, with each taking the form of an open, fully explorable level with interconnected outdoor and indoor spaces. The first chapter takes place in the canyons, a large stretch of vast desert that was ripe for development thanks to the railway running through it until, well, stuff happened. Eldritch horror stuff. Despite being sparsely populated, the canyons feature a lot of interesting landmarks in various states of disrepair. A sleepy one-street town containing a saloon, a jail, and other things, a haunted fort, a monster-infested farm, a tower, a mine, and a burial ground that may or may not be infested with Vendingos. Editor's note: it is infested with a lot of Wendigos. Like, a lot. The second chapter takes you to the swamps, and they're as shitty and oppressive as you might think. Notable landmarks include a mid-sized fishing town with its own church, harbor, sawmill, and a decrepit cruise ship that is very fun to explore, a crypt, a cultist cave, and a fucking alligator farm. Yes, alligators, of the human-alligator hybrid type. Oh man, I hate these things. The third and last location is the mountains. Being the most economically developed area before the apocalypse, it has the biggest town of all the levels, and funnily enough, you can even find the remnants of a circus troupe nearby. Of course, the brief descriptions I provided don't even come close to doing these areas' design and attention to detail justice. Bloodwest spaces are so fun and satisfying to explore. The game's spaces feature that gothic factor, instilling a feeling of fear of the unknown, but just enough confidence to help you push through that fear and explore all nooks and crannies for loot, interesting curios, and bits of lore. The handcrafted nature of the maps makes exploration all the more satisfying as it allows the creation of some very exciting set pieces. The first example that comes to mind is when I was navigating the skeleton of a collapsed railway bridge surrounded by floating ghost skulls. The cruise ship in the swamps is another great example. Go there and watch as any semblance of spatial awareness disappears the moment you hear a monster groaning and can't identify the source of the noise. But the set piece that absolutely destroyed me was the pit in the mountains map. It's this long, slow descent into a demon-infested labyrinthine pit interspersed with notes left behind by a failed expedition. Oh my god, this fucking pit, man. Even though I had sorta learned the mechanics and seen everything there was to see by that point, I had to take a break midway through because I just couldn't take it anymore. I don't know what it was about this particular area that got to me so hard. The screeching giant insect-like demons, the sky visible from all angles serving as a subtle indicator of how far you descended. Loved it. Finally, Bloodwest features a fair amount of content, both mandatory and optional. Many of the side quests follow the same formula. Go to dangerous place, take cursed artifact, bring cursed artifact back for cash money. I wouldn't say they're super engaging, but at least they do take you to interesting places, which is the most important thing after all. By the way, there is a certain hidden quest that concerns a specific painting knife. Don't sell that painting knife. Trust me. That's all I'm gonna say. As for the main quest, I was quite surprised by its flexibility. Not narrative flexibility, let's be clear. What I mean is that you can essentially solve quests before having even received them by exploring areas earlier than you're supposed to. There's a quest in chapter 2 that requires you to locate and retrieve the belongings of a certain dead gunslinger in order to resurrect him. Well, I happen to have retrieved all of those items a few hours earlier, and I pretty much solved the quest as soon as I got it. No backtracking needed. The game stored the quest items in a separate inventory and patiently waited for me to reach the relevant narrative beat to use them. Love that. Thanks, Bloodwest. And that's pretty much it for this video. Bloodwest does so many things right in a straight-to-the-point 20-hour-long package. The gunplay is punchy and visceral. The build, skill, and weapon variety add a lot to the game's replay factor. Its gloomy, horror western setting is filled with tons of fascinating bits of lore and stories to discover. I loved Bloodwest, and I'm excited to see what Hyperstrange has in store for us in the future. Thanks for watching. A special thanks to Hey Blondie for lending his voice to this video, and my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.